Samantha thought she had the perfect marriage. But when her husband Derek began a secret affair with her own mother Linda, what started as betrayal spiraled into obsession, manipulation, and a brutal murder that shocked the entire town. Samantha and Derek lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Savannah, Georgia. Their home, a white brick two-story with green shutters and a red door, stood out for its charm. Neighbors often waved as they drove by, admiring the colorful flowers in the front yard or the cheerful decorations Samantha placed on the porch each season. The couple had been married for 6 years, and to everyone on the outside, they were deeply in love. They had a little girl named Ava, who just turned 4 and was the light of their lives. Samantha taught first grade at the local elementary school. She was patient, kind, and well-liked by her students and fellow teachers. Derek, on the other hand, was a successful real estate agent known for his charisma and sharp suits. Together, they seemed like the American dream. Life was simple, stable, and predictable. Samantha woke early each morning to prepare Ava's breakfast and pack her school bag. Derek often left later in the day for property showings or client meetings. Evenings were spent as a family eating dinner at the table, playing with Ava in the backyard, or watching TV cuddled under a blanket on the couch. On weekends, they attended church and hosted barbecues for friends and neighbors. People admired their life. They had no idea what was beginning to unfold behind closed doors. 2 months before their 6th wedding anniversary, Samantha's mother, Linda, underwent hip surgery. She had lived alone since her husband passed years earlier, and Samantha insisted that Linda come stay with them during recovery. Derek was hesitant but agreed. After all, it was temporary and Linda was family. At 55, Linda was energetic, elegant, and unusually fit for her age. She had always been conscious of her looks and kept herself well groomed. She arrived with 2 large suitcases, several handbags, and an air of confidence that made an impression on everyone she met. She quickly settled into the guest room downstairs and began adjusting to the rhythm of the household. At first, everything was normal. Samantha and Derek helped Linda move around the house, making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. Linda was grateful and expressed her appreciation constantly. As the weeks passed, she began regaining her mobility. She cooked occasionally, watched Ava when Samantha was busy, and joined Derek for casual conversations in the living room when Samantha stayed late at school. Their small interactions, harmless at first, began to grow in frequency and intimacy. A hand brushing against his arm, long glances held a bit too long, compliments that went beyond friendly. Derek noticed but said nothing. He wasn't blind to Linda's beauty or the way she carried herself. He tried to dismiss it as imagination or coincidence. She was, after all, his wife's mother, but Linda was subtle, calculated even. She knew when Samantha would be out late. She knew when Ava would be napping or at preschool. She found excuses to be in the kitchen when Derek came home from work. She wore clothes that clung tightly to her body, always styled, always ready, even if she claimed she was just lounging around. Derek found himself feeling things he couldn't explain drawn to her attention. Flattered by her compliments and intrigued by her boldness, it began with a conversation about real estate. Then she asked for help lifting a box. Then she asked for a glass of wine while Samantha was at a parent-teacher meeting. The barriers slowly began to dissolve. Linda often brought up her loneliness, how hard it had been to live alone all those years. She mentioned how Derek reminded her of her late husband. She praised him, told him how lucky Samantha was to have such a man. He would smile awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Inside, a part of him started to crave the attention. Samantha, always tired from work or focused on Ava, had grown more distant lately. She didn't notice the change in Derek's behavior, how he stayed up later, lingered longer in the living room, or dressed sharper for no apparent reason. One Saturday evening, Samantha had to attend a fundraising dinner for her school. Linda offered to watch Ava so Derek could relax. After Ava was asleep, Linda poured 2 glasses of wine and joined Derek on the back porch. The air was warm, the sky filled with stars. They talked for hours about life, about regrets, about marriage. That night marked a shift. Though no lines had been crossed physically, emotionally something had taken root. Derek couldn't stop thinking about her, and Linda knew exactly what she was doing. As the days passed, the tension in the house thickened. Samantha remained unaware, caught up in her own world of lesson plans and motherhood. Derek started finding excuses to be home during the day. Linda began walking without her cane, a signal that she was no longer dependent, but she chose to stay. She claimed she needed a bit more time to regain her strength. Samantha welcomed it, thinking it was good for Ava to have her grandmother around. One afternoon, Derek arrived home early from a canceled meeting. Linda was in the kitchen wearing a satin robe. She said she had just gotten out of the shower. The robe clung to her, and the look in her eyes said more than her words. He stood frozen for a moment before retreating to his room. But something inside him had already shifted. He started to seek her out, checking if she was home, wondering what she was wearing. He started texting her, initially about errands or groceries, but the messages became flirtatious, suggestive. Linda responded with equal enthusiasm. The affair hadn't begun yet, not physically, but the groundwork was there. The secrecy, the attraction, the risk it all added to the temptation, and neither of them tried to stop it. They felt like two people lost in a storm, pulled toward each other by desire and the thrill of the forbiddance. As the days moved forward, the perfect family image remained untouched on the outside. But inside that house, a quiet betrayal was brewing, one that would tear the family apart and lead to a dark and unexpected end. The days that followed were filled with tension that only two people in the house seemed to feel. Samantha remained her cheerful self, unaware of the secret growing right beneath her nose. Derek, on the other hand, was beginning to unravel. He became more distracted during conversations, more withdrawn during meals, and increasingly avoidant of Samantha's touch. Linda noticed every detail, and her smile grew sharper each time Derek's eyes flickered in her direction. What had begun as a dangerous game was evolving into something deeper, darker, and irreversible. The affair officially started on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Samantha was stuck at school due to a sudden staff meeting, and Ava had been taken for a playdate by a neighbor. Derek returned home early, soaked and frustrated from a property showing gone wrong. Linda was alone in the living room, dressed in a soft gray sweater and fitted jeans, a book in her hands and a look of calm on her face. He stood in the doorway, dripping with rain, and she looked up at him with the kind of attention he hadn't received in months. Something passed between them, silent, heavy, understood. They didn't plan it, there were no words. Just impulse. A spark ignited long ago, finally bursting into flame. From that moment on, boundaries meant nothing. The trust Samantha had in her mother, in her husband, shattered without her knowledge. Every quiet moment they spent alone became a window for more stolen time together. Quick touches in the kitchen, shared glances in the hallway, whispered exchanges in the dim light of early mornings. They both knew it was wrong, but neither made any effort to stop. In their minds, they believed they were too careful, too calculated to ever get caught. Derek became addicted to the thrill. Linda gave him attention, desire, validation. With her, he didn't feel like a husband who had slipped into routine or a father overwhelmed by responsibilities. He felt seen, powerful, alive. He told himself it was just physical, just temporary. But the truth was harder to face. He was in deep and he didn't want out. Linda, however, wasn't driven by lust alone. Her motivations were layered and complex. Part of her wanted revenge for years of loneliness. Another part relished the control she had over her daughter's husband, over the man she now claimed silently as her own. The more intimate their encounters became, the more dangerous her behavior grew. She began keeping personal items in Derek's drawers. She left subtle traces, a strand of hair, the scent of perfume, a smudge of lipstick on a coffee cup, things that could be explained away, but barely. It was almost like she wanted to be caught. Samantha remained blissfully unaware. Focused on her growing responsibilities at work and raising Ava, she noticed Derek's mood swings but blamed them on work pressure. She thought Linda had become more involved, more energetic, and she appreciated the help with Ava. She had no reason to doubt them. Her trust was complete, her guard completely down. Over time, their methods grew bolder. Derek would invent meetings that didn't exist just to spend a few hours alone with Linda. They would check into motels under fake names, taking care to delete messages, erase call logs, and wipe any evidence. They convinced themselves that as long as they kept everything secret, no harm was being done. But secrets have a way of growing too large to contain. One night, while Derek and Linda were out under the guise of shopping for Linda's prescriptions, they ran into someone from the neighborhood, a mutual friend who knew them both. The encounter was short, polite, but unsettling. They weren't supposed to be seen together, especially not alone, especially not late in the evening. That moment was a wake-up call for Derek, but only briefly. Linda laughed it off, convincing him they had nothing to fear. Inside the house, things began to shift. Samantha started sensing something odd, something she couldn't explain. Derek stopped looking her in the eyes. He no longer initiated affection, and when she reached for him, he flinched. Linda, once warm and motherly, became more territorial. She offered to handle Ava's routines entirely. She inserted herself into every part of the household, from grocery lists to decisions about decor. It was subtle, but over time, Samantha began to feel like a guest in her own home. There were moments when Samantha questioned her instincts, a pair of earrings missing, a strange look between Linda and Derek during dinner, a forgotten phone on the kitchen counter displaying a name she didn't recognize. But each time she convinced herself she was overthinking. These were people she loved, people she trusted. Her mind must be playing tricks. Derek lived in a constant state of anxiety. Every knock on the door startled him. Every phone buzz sent a chill down his spine. He became more paranoid with every passing week. He started monitoring his own texts, checking his pockets twice before going home, deleting photos he once saved. But the paranoia didn't stop him. The risk only made the affair feel more intense, more consuming. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about addiction. Linda began asking questions she had no right to ask about the will, about property titles, about what would happen if Derek and Samantha ever separated. She spoke of a life they could have together, just the two of them. She even suggested that Ava would be better off if she were raised in a more honest home. Her fantasies grew bolder, darker, and more possessive. That's when the balance started to tip. What had started as a secret affair was spiraling into obsession. Derek felt trapped between two worlds, the life he had built with Samantha and the chaos he had created with Linda. Every moment was a choice between maintaining the lie and escaping before it collapsed. But no matter how much he feared the consequences, he couldn't stop. He didn't know how. The affair had crossed every boundary. What once lived in shadows now hovered dangerously close to the light. Samantha remained in the dark, still calling her husband sweetheart, still thanking her mother for helping out, still going about her life without knowing it was already broken. And just as the secret began to rot the foundation of their home, something unexpected happened. Samantha found something she was never meant to see. Samantha never expected to find anything unusual. She wasn't searching for proof, wasn't snooping, and hadn't let herself truly believe that something was wrong. But one afternoon, while doing the laundry, she found a receipt that would become the first crack in the mirror of her perfect life. It was from a small motel on the edge of town, a place she'd never been. The date on it matched a Thursday she distinctly remembered. She had been at a late school meeting. Derek said he was showing a property in another town, and Linda was home watching Ava. There was no reason for Derek to be anywhere near that motel. Samantha held the paper in her hand for a long time, her mind racing. It was probably nothing, she told herself. A client meeting, maybe? Some last-minute errand? She tucked the receipt into a drawer and tried to forget about it. But once doubt enters the mind, it spreads fast. Samantha began paying closer attention. She noticed that Derek was constantly on his phone, often walking into other rooms to answer calls or typing messages and smiling at the screen. She caught Linda watching him with a strange expression, one that didn't quite fit the role of a mother-in-law. At first, she brushed it off as coincidence. But the seed of suspicion had already taken root. A few days later, while vacuuming Derek's car, Samantha found a bracelet under the passenger seat. It was delicate silver with small heart charms. It looked exactly like one Linda claimed she had lost a few weeks ago. When she asked about it, Linda acted surprised, said she hadn't seen it in ages. Her explanation was vague and unconvincing. Samantha felt a sharp knot twist in her stomach. Something didn't feel right. Still, she didn't say anything. She didn't want to accuse her husband or her mother without real evidence. She needed to be sure. She began looking for patterns. Samantha started keeping mental notes of when Derek left the house, when Linda stayed behind, and how often they both seemed to disappear at the same time. The more she watched, the more the pieces refused to fit the innocent picture she had always believed in. Late-night whispers, hushed laughter, closed doors that used to stay open, it all felt off. She didn't want to believe it, but the signs were too many to ignore. That's when she made a decision that would change everything. She installed a small security camera in the living room, disguised as a digital photo frame. She told herself it was for safety, just in case. But deep down, she knew what she was looking for. She placed it where it had a clear view of the couch, the hallway, and the kitchen areas where Derek and Linda often spent time together. Then she waited. Days passed. Samantha reviewed the footage quietly each night after everyone went to bed. For the first few days, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just Linda watching TV or reading, Derek passing through with coffee, but then came the fifth night. It was late. Derek had returned home claiming he was exhausted from work. Samantha pretended to be asleep when he climbed into bed. Hours later, he wasn't there. When she watched the footage the next morning, her heart nearly stopped. Derek and Linda were sitting together on the couch. She was leaning into him, her hand resting on his thigh. They were whispering, too close, too comfortable. Then she saw it. Derek kissed her. A slow, intimate kiss, not the kind shared between family. Samantha stared at the screen in disbelief, her hands trembling. Everything inside her collapsed in that moment. She didn't scream. She didn't confront them. Not yet. She wanted to be smart. She needed more. Over the next week, Samantha backed up every piece of footage. She recorded their movements, copied text messages from Derek's phone when he left it unattended, even installed software on Linda's tablet to retrieve deleted files. She became someone else, silent, watchful, methodical. Pain pushed her to be brave. She uncovered deleted photos of hotel rooms, messages with private jokes, videos taken in places she had never been. One video showed Linda in a red dress, smiling at the camera while Derek filmed her in a mirror. Another showed them in a hotel bed, holding each other as if they were in a real relationship. Samantha saved every file and stored them on a hidden drive. She couldn't understand how the two people she loved most could betray her so completely. Each morning, she got up and made breakfast like nothing was wrong. She kissed Ava, packed her lunch, waved goodbye to Derek. She even chatted with Linda over coffee, listening to her talk about errands or her plans for the day. All the while, her chest burned with the weight of knowing. Her heart was broken, but she kept her expression calm. She contacted a lawyer, a quiet visit during a lunch break, no one knowing. She explained everything, showed the proof, and discussed custody of Ava. The lawyer was stunned by the story, especially the involvement of her mother. Samantha left the office with a folder of paperwork and a clear mind. She wasn't going to live in the shadow of betrayal any longer. When the time came, Samantha confronted them both, not with screaming or anger, but with facts. She laid everything out in front of them, the videos, the texts, the images. Derek went pale. Linda's face twisted into something unfamiliar, something cruel and defensive. They tried to talk, to deny, to shift the blame, but Samantha didn't listen. She had already decided. Divorce papers were served the next morning. Derek moved out a week later. Linda followed soon after, leaving behind silence and chaos. The home felt empty, but Samantha felt stronger than she expected. She told Ava that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, but that they would be okay. She meant it. But what Samantha didn't know, what she couldn't yet see, was that this betrayal was just the beginning. The emotional damage had been done, but something far more dangerous was about to surface. A storm was brewing behind the scenes, one that would turn an already broken family into the subject of a crime investigation. And soon someone would end up dead. Weeks after the confrontation, Samantha tried to rebuild a sense of normalcy for herself and Ava. She focused on work, kept her routines tight, and leaned on a few close friends for emotional support. Derek had moved into a rented apartment across town and made occasional visits to see Ava, but their interactions were tense and brief. Linda had vanished. After being forced out of the home, she cut off all contact. No calls, no texts, no explanations. Samantha didn't know where her mother had gone, and she didn't care to find out. For her, that chapter was closed. But underneath the surface, something darker had started to unravel. It began with a phone call from a local pharmacy. The caller explained that a prescription for a high-dose sedative had been filled under Linda's name, and that Samantha had been listed as the emergency contact. The pharmacist thought it odd, given the dosage, and just wanted to double-check that everything was all right. Alarmed, Samantha asked for details. The prescription had been picked up 2 days ago. That was the first sign something was wrong. Then came the second. Derek didn't show up for his scheduled weekend visit with Ava. No call, no message. Samantha texted him multiple times, but there was no reply. She called his phone, which rang twice before going to voicemail. At first, she assumed he was avoiding her out of guilt or embarrassment, but when an entire day passed without any word, a new fear began to grow inside her. By Monday, she drove to his apartment, Ava asleep in the back seat. She knocked, then banged on the door. No response. The hallway was quiet. She asked the building manager if he had seen Derek. He hadn't. Inside, Samantha's hands were cold with dread. She contacted the police and reported him missing. Later that evening, police found Derek's car abandoned off a rural road, hidden behind trees near a ravine. The doors were locked. His phone was found under the passenger seat. Blood was on the headrest. In the trunk, a half-empty bottle of whiskey sat beside a torn piece of fabric that looked like it had been ripped from clothing. Investigators suspected foul play almost immediately. 2 days later, Derek's body was discovered at the bottom of the ravine, hidden under branches and debris. He had been beaten, his head cracked open from blunt force trauma. There were bruises along his arms and neck, defensive wounds that told a story of struggle. The body was partially burned, as if someone had attempted to destroy evidence. It was a gruesome scene, one that turned Samantha's world upside down again. The police launched a full homicide investigation. They questioned Samantha first, then her co-workers, neighbors, and Derek's colleagues. But one name stood out from the beginning: Linda. She had motive. She had opportunity. And she had disappeared. Investigators traced Linda's last known whereabouts to a motel about 20 miles outside of town. Security footage showed her checking in under a false name 2 days before Derek was reported missing. A few hours after that, a black car matching Derek's was seen pulling into the same parking lot. He entered the room but never came out. The motel manager recalled hearing loud noises late at night, what sounded like a struggle, but he never reported it. Forensics found fingerprints inside the room, bloodstains on the carpet, burned cloth in the bathroom trash. All signs pointed to Linda, but she was gone. A BOLO alert was issued statewide. Her bank accounts were frozen and airports were notified. Weeks passed with no trace. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Back at home, Samantha was left with more than grief. She was left with questions that haunted her. Had Linda planned this all along? Had the affair been part of a larger obsession? Had Derek been trying to end things? The police later discovered an unsent email saved in Derek's drafts folder. In it, he told Linda he couldn't continue the affair. He was going to confess everything to Samantha and cut off all contact. The email was dated just 1 day before he disappeared. But there was more. Investigators uncovered a life insurance policy Linda had taken out on herself months earlier, naming Derek as the sole beneficiary. Oddly, a second policy had been filed under a different provider, this time listing Derek again, but forged as if Linda were his wife. She had used Samantha's maiden name, faked documentation, and added Derek as a beneficiary on her own paperwork. It was convoluted, but it revealed intent. The deeper they dug, the more unstable Linda appeared. Old journals found in a storage unit she had rented painted a disturbing picture. She wrote about Derek as if they were soulmates. She called Samantha unworthy, blamed her for stealing him, and claimed they were meant to raise Ava together. In one entry she wrote, "If I can't have him, no one can. He promised me everything." The motive was no longer just betrayal. It was obsession. Linda had crafted a fantasy in her mind and was willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. The case made local headlines. A mother seducing her daughter's husband, a love triangle ending in murder, a fugitive grandmother. People couldn't believe it was real. Samantha stopped watching the news. She blocked out everything she could to protect Ava, but her daughter had questions, and Samantha struggled to find answers appropriate for a child. She told her only that Daddy had gone to heaven and Grandma wasn't coming back. Months passed. Despite the manhunt, Linda remained missing. Tips came in from different state sightings at diners, bus stations, remote cabins, but nothing led to her arrest. Some believed she had fled the country. Others were convinced she had taken her own life. Samantha, however, wasn't so sure. The woman she had known as her mother was gone, replaced by someone colder, more calculating. Someone capable of hiding in plain sight. Every creak in the floor, every unfamiliar car passing the house, kept Samantha on edge. She checked locks twice. She changed her number, installed new cameras. She lived with the constant fear that Linda might return, not to apologize, not to explain, but to finish what she started. In the quiet aftermath of the horror, Samantha tried to put the pieces of her life back together. But the damage was deep. Trust, once broken in such a violent way, is hard to rebuild. And though the house was calmer now, it no longer felt like home. The woman who had once held her as a baby had turned into her greatest threat. The man she thought would protect her forever had betrayed her in the worst way. And the world she had built with love and care had crumbled under the weight of secrets, obsession, and blood. Nearly a year had passed since the murder, but the pain still lingered like an open wound. Samantha had settled into a routine with Ava, trying to create a life that felt stable again, even if only on the surface. She sold the house they once shared and moved to a different city 3 hours away, leaving behind every street, every familiar corner that reminded her of what had been stolen. A fresh start, people called it. But there's no such thing as a clean slate when the past refuses to stay buried. Though Derek's killer was never formally caught, everyone close to the case believed the truth was obvious. Linda had vanished just before his death, left behind a trail of disturbing writings, forged documents, and fingerprints on blood-stained walls. The evidence told its own story, one that pointed clearly to her. Yet the fact that she had slipped away so easily haunted Samantha more than anything. It made her feel vulnerable, exposed, as if the nightmare could return at any moment, dressed in the face of the woman who once tucked her into bed. Despite the official closure of the case, the media still latched on to the story. The mother-in-law killer, they called her. Podcasts speculated on her whereabouts. Online forums dissected every piece of available evidence, crafting wild theories that ranged from hidden identities to cartel involvement. None of it mattered to Samantha. She stayed off the internet, deleted her social media accounts, and focused all her attention on raising Ava. That was the only thing that still made sense. For Ava's sake, Samantha tried to keep their lives simple. They moved into a quiet neighborhood near a good school. Ava made friends quickly, her laughter returning little by little, but Samantha remained on edge. She didn't trust strangers. She installed security systems, kept emergency contacts memorized, and slept with her phone beside her pillow. Fear had etched itself into her bones. Then, one cold morning in October, she received a letter. It had no return address. Just her name, written in neat, careful handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper and a photograph. The paper contained only 5 words, "You took him from me." The photo showed Ava playing in the schoolyard, taken from a distance, clearly without her knowledge. Samantha froze. Her hands shook. It was unmistakably recent. Panic set in instantly. She called the police, turned over the letter, and kept Ava home for days. Officers increased patrols near the school and suggested that Samantha stay alert, but admitted there was little they could do unless another threat occurred. The envelope had no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing traceable. But Samantha didn't need evidence to know who had sent it. Linda was still watching. She hired a private investigator. The man, ex-law enforcement, promised to dig into possible sightings. He traveled across state lines, checked shelters, motels, border crossings. Weeks went by without any results. Then he found something. A small rural gas station in Mississippi had surveillance footage from 2 weeks prior. A woman matching Linda's description was seen paying in cash and purchasing a burner phone. Her hair was shorter, her figure thinner, her clothes plain, but it was her. The investigator believed she was living off the grid, staying in cheap roadside motels, moving from town to avoid detection. And now she had somehow found Samantha again. This revelation changed everything. Samantha began making plans to disappear once more. She spoke to attorneys about custody protections, obtained a restraining order despite Linda's fugitive status, and even considered changing Ava's name. The thought of running again exhausted her, but she was willing to do anything to protect her daughter. But something unexpected happened before she could leave. The private investigator called one night, his voice tense. A body had been discovered in an abandoned hunting cabin 3 states over. It was a woman. Decomposed, identification was difficult, but the clothes and items found nearby matched what Linda had been wearing in the Mississippi footage. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of violence, just a bottle of sleeping pills, an empty bottle of wine, and a handwritten note. Samantha received a copy of the letter a week later, forwarded by law enforcement. It was written in the same handwriting as the photo note, but longer this time. The words were disjointed, unstable. Linda had written about Derek, calling their affair a sacred bond that was ripped away. She blamed Samantha for destroying their future and claimed she was never meant to be a mother. The final line read, "Now he's gone, I'll join him. And you can live with the pieces." DNA confirmed the body's identity. Linda was dead. Samantha stared at the news for hours, unable to feel relief. There was no peace in this ending, only silence. The woman who had once rocked her to sleep, kissed scraped knees, and cooked her favorite meals had become a murderer, a stalker, a shadow that had haunted her every step for a year. Now that shadow was gone, but its imprint remained. The police closed the case officially, no charges, no trial, just a file sealed with tragedy. Samantha kept the news from Ava, telling her only that Grandma had gone far away and wouldn't be coming back. Ava, still too young to grasp the full depth of what had happened, nodded and returned to her coloring. For her, life continued in soft, manageable moments, but for Samantha, it was harder. She kept looking over her shoulder for weeks after the confirmation. Every creak in the night, every knock at the door made her flinch. But as the seasons changed, the fear began to lift, slowly, gently, like fog retreating from the hills at dawn. One spring morning, while Ava played in the yard chasing bubbles, Samantha sat on the porch with a coffee in her hand and a blanket on her lap. The wind was quiet, no letters. No strangers watching from the distance. Just sunlight, laughter, and the small hope that maybe, just maybe, they could begin again. The scars would never fully heal. The betrayal would always live somewhere deep inside her, but she was still standing. And in a world that had tried so hard to break her, that counted for something.